Page 95, number 11, we're asked to find the domain of the function, and the function is 3x minus 1 divided by x plus 3 times x minus 1. Part A asks us to write it in interval notation, and Part B asks us to write it in set builder notation. So, what we want to find is what values are restricted from the domain, because we start from the idea that the domain can be all real numbers. Then we look at any restrictions. What values cannot be in the domain? And so whenever we have a fraction, we have to think about whether or not there's a possibility that the denominator could be 0, since division by 0 does not exist in our numbering system. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to look at the fact that I have factors in the denominator. So if either of those two factors, either x plus 3 or x minus 1 were 0, then I would have values that cannot be in the domain. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to set each factor equal to 0 and solve for x, and those will be my restricted values. So I have two values here that cannot exist. So x cannot equal negative 3 and x cannot equal 1. So in set builder notation, in interval notation, that's part A, I want to list all the values that I can and exclude any. So I can have pretty much any negative value up to negative 3, but not including negative 3. So I'm going to leave that as an open parenthesis instead of a closed bracket. And I'm going to join that, I'm going to use the union symbol with, from that point, again excluding negative 3, up to my next excluded value, which is positive 1, which again I have to leave as a parenthesis because I don't want to include that. And I'm going to join that with all the other values. So there's my union symbol again, open parenthesis for 1, and that was the largest value that I had to exclude, so I can have any other value. So I'm going to go from 1, let me write that a little neater, I'm going to go from 1 to infinity. So that would be our domain in interval notation. Now, to write it in set builder notation, here's what all the symbols mean. So you use a curly bracket. You write what you're defining. So we're defining x, and we use a straight line here. That means such that. So I'll write that underneath. So that means such that. So here's how we're defining it. Such that x belongs to the real numbers. Oops, I put below. Belongs to the reals. And then I'm going to put a comma, and I'm going to write, that's true, but two things that cannot happen, x cannot equal negative 3, and x cannot equal 1. And then I close the bracket. So in that way, I have excluded the values. I have stated what x is. It's a real number with the exception of negative 3 and positive 1.